The show where there are no penalties, nothing is offside, and everything is fair game. This is The Gloves Are Off.
All right, welcome to this week's edition of The Gloves Are Off. I'm Moses Woldo, and I'm joined by my co-host, one of the voices on the CPCA radio, Greg Buchanan. How are you?
Not too bad, Moses, not too bad.
Excellent. We've got some great topics to talk about. And I'm joined by one of our interns, actually, here at Newcap Television, Stefan Kaczmar. How you doing, my man?
Great. Great to be here, Moses. To finally be here, it's a treat.
All right. Well, you know what? Let's get this thing going. Let's talk about the West Final. The CFL is already determined who's going to make it to the Grey Cup, but I'll tell you what. What can you say about Kevin Glenn and the Calgary Stampeders? All the stuff that went on before the game started, of course, during that week. You had Nick Lewis's tweet. You had the fractured arm by Tate. That meant, Glenn, hey, by the way, we didn't want you in the first playoff game, but we want you in the second one. And talk about a great start, a 68-yard touchdown pass to Marco McDaniel, the way he stepped into the pocket and avoided pressure. I was more impressed with Kevin Glenn than anything else out of any time I've seen him this year. What can you say about him and BC? Because BC looked like they didn't really game plan or had an effective game plan for a guy like Kevin Glenn.
Well, as you mentioned, he stayed in the pocket more, and the thing is, he threw 3 TD passes, and none of those guys' names was Nick Lewis. He spread the offense, and he confused BC, and I don't know, BC just didn't have it that day.
Yeah, BC's defense looked not of sorts. Whenever they want to pin their ears back and go after Glenn, all of a sudden there's a little dump off to Cornish, or else he found a hole through the middle. Blown assignment on that first touchdown completely. The safety's nowhere to be found. But you look at more than anything, you have to have a lot of respect for Kevin Glenn. The previous week, he's not their #1 quarterback. Tate is. All of a sudden, he's a true professional. He goes in, does his job well. And interesting to see now, we were talking just before we went on air, what's going to happen now if Glenn goes out and wins a Grey Cup, they release him and go with Tate for next year? It's a dilemma the Calgary Stampeders might have to face.
I'll tell you what, the Grey Cup is going to be on November 25th of 2012. Was it 5 years ago? The last time they hosted was November 25th of 2007. Of course, remember, Kevin Glenn got injured in that East Final. A bit of retribution 5 years later to actually go to a Grey Cup and lead a team, and you could see the emotion during the post-game. Let's go head out to the East Final. Let's talk about Ricky Ray, another quarterback that was deemed washed up, according to some Edmonton Eskimo brass, and let's be honest, it was Eric Tillman who got rid of him, much to the dismay of the fans. And we're seeing the fruits of the labor, I guess, so to speak, of what Ricky Ray can still do. How vindicated must Ricky Ray feel at this point from being traded and told, you don't fit in our plans, to taking the Toronto Argonauts to the Grey Cup Final?
You go ahead.
As an Eskimo fan, the Eskimos tried to find somebody to point the finger at, and unfortunately it was Ricky Ray. I don't think he was the issue in Edmonton. Toronto brought in him for one reason, to win the Grey Cup. Any team that has Ricky Ray on its team has a chance to win the Grey Cup, and as Ricky showed last week, he's there to get the job done. One
of the best quarterbacks in the CFL, or probably right now the best quarterback in the CFL, because he looked awesome on Sunday. At the start, it looked a little scary. Alouettes jumped out to that lead, and they said Toronto wanted to go into that and try to keep it close early on. They didn't. But credit off to Ricky Ray. Just like he is in the field, is a very cool and calm customer. Didn't panic. His offense didn't panic. He's a great leader for that team, because they didn't panic when they were down early, and they just kept on coming along. In that second half, they just exploded.
And I guess that's what they fed on, too. Once you saw the reaction from Ricky Ray on the sidelines as that great poker face that he has, you knew nothing was going to faze him, and I think that was a benefit to the Toronto offense and defense, because they came out huge and flying in that second half as well.
You kind of have to wonder now, Anthony Cavillo, he's going to face surgery during the offseason. Will he be coming back? They were talking that he looks a little slower. He looks a step slower. He's getting up in age, and he is. What's going to happen with his position in Montreal? We were just talking Kevin Glenn possibly getting released by Calgary. He could end up in Montreal.
Hey, McPherson probably, well, he'll be disappointed about that. The guy's been waiting in the wings behind Calvillo for how many years? So, but let's move on to the Grey Cup. I think this is going to be an interesting matchup. This is the third meeting between Toronto and Calgary. Of course, 71 going the Stampeders' way, 91 going the Argos' way. Sure enough, it took another 21 years in order to them to meet each other in the playoffs. But what matchup are you going to be looking forward to here? Because there are a lot of great storylines. Of course, we just mentioned both Ray and Glenn, quarterbacks who've done extremely well in those finals in respective of the East and West. Then you have the two MOP nominees. You got Chad Owens and, of course, John Cornish, who are game breakers. Or is there another matchup that you guys are interested in?
I like to battle the quarterbacks. It's the guy who's supposed to be there and win it versus the guy who's not supposed to be there and just there just because, because of the circumstances. This is Ricky. This is why he was brought in, to win the Grey Cup. Kevin Glenn now gets a chance to steal that away from Toronto and Ricky. That's the matchup I'll be looking for. Yeah,
look, and both of those players are great team players too. Ricky Ray, his influence in the Argos has been unmeasurable because he's one of those calm guys. Kevin Glenn, he could have sulked about not playing in that West semifinal and be bitter about it, but he knew his chance was going to come. It did, and he took advantage of it. I like the matchup in quarterbacks. Cornish against Owens was also kind of interesting, but I think more than anything, I think it's going to be the defense. I always say defense wins you championships. If the Argos can stop the Stampeders, it could be Toronto celebrating one.
All right, well, then it comes to my next question for you guys. What advantage do you give either team on offense, defense, or special teams? Who takes what?
I got to give it to Calgary. Just the way they frustrated BC in their obviously on their home turf. To frustrate that team when BC is a team built to go to the Grey Cup, and for the Calgary to stop them at so many different levels, I think I got to give Calgary that advantage. Despite it being in Toronto, I think Kevin Glenn has a chip on his shoulder. I think they're rolling. I like Calgary across the board.
Well, I think you across the board probably. Defensively, I think Calgary's better defensively. I kind of like the Argos offense, though, if they can nickel and dime it down the field. The Stampeders defense was phenomenal against BC, but the specialty teams, we always talk about in the CFL, the specialty teams always becomes a factor, and it's pretty hard to disagree with the Argos probably having maybe a little bit of a maybe an advantage there with Owens because he could break at any time.
That's right. Owens is definitely the game breaker on that side. But the offense, Calgary can spread the ball so well. John Cornish is there, and they could throw it to 4 receivers in Calgary. So I like it.
Yeah, it's going to be a great matchup nonetheless. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick commercial break. Exciting times in Toronto with the Grey Cup, and of course the Toronto Blue Jays doing some great things. We'll have more coming up in a little bit here.